Good morning, folks. Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, your host, and we're in luck today because we're in Manhattan, and as you can see behind, we're at Radina's Bakehouse, where we're going to be meeting Wade Radina, and we're going to be making some bread from scratch. So come on back and see us in action.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, your host, and today we're in Manhattan, Kansas, Riley County, and we're at the Radina Bakehouse. We're in luck because we have Wade Radina, and he's going to be talking to us about how he got started in the baking business. And so, Wade, kind of take off. Tell me how you got here.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I am a Kansan, I suppose, not by birth, but by privilege. My parents were both from Kansas and raised the family in Chicago, but bought the family farm outside Scott City in the late 70s. There was kind of a movement back to the farm. So that's my Kansas connection. I'm a K-State grad, and my wife and I wandered away for a while and found our way back in 2001 when we bought a coffee house in Aggieville, and I also took a full-time teaching at K-State, teaching business. And from 2001 to now, I left the teaching business in 2010, expanded the coffee business, but always wanted to get into baking. We did bake in our coffee house, but the bakery is very small and very limited. I wanted to get into artisan bread. So we finally found the location and the opportunity to locate our bakehouse here in downtown Manhattan. This is a new building, new development, and opened in June of 2014. Okay. So, and the bakehouse kind of has allowed us to expand our commitment to local sourcing. Everything as local as we can. All the wheat we use is grown and milled in Kansas, and that's a commitment we have. So our primary wheat is coming out of Hudson, Kansas, with Stafford flour. And we also use Farmer Direct out of Salina, the mill out of Salina, for all of our whole wheat product. So and those are our primary flours that we're using.
Well, it's kind of interesting about the Stafford mill, the Hudson mill, is that, well, just tell me a little bit about the Hudson mill.
Well, the Hudson mill, of course, is outside Great Bend. Pretty big operation, but it is the only mill in the United States, if I understand it correctly, that can trace their flour back to the farmer and the field that wheat came out of when it was harvested, which I think is pretty awesome.
That's pretty impressive, that is.
And it's great flour, it makes fantastic bread, and we're happy to use it. It's a privilege to use it.
So you've kind of put the coffee in with the bakehouse here. You not only do breads, but obviously you have pastries as well.
Yes, we do. Of course, we're very traditional in our approach to everything. You won't find us Starbucking our coffee or anything like that. Our coffee, the way we serve it, the way we make it, the way we roast it is traditional to Italy. And we do roast our coffee, and that's consistent with our philosophy. If we can do it from scratch, we do it from scratch. We're not going to take anything out of a box and throw it in an oven. We're not going to use pre-made doughs. So that's why we needed a big bakery with the traditional equipment. And I'll take a well-trained human being over a machine any day.
Anytime, yeah. So Wade, stay with us. We've got to take a break here now. So folks at home, now's a good time to get a cup of coffee, and we'll be back with you in just a moment.
To see this show and past episodes of Ag AM in Kansas, go online to agaminkansas.com.
KFRM is one of the largest farm radio stations in the nation, dedicated to informing and entertaining rural listeners from northern Oklahoma to southwestern Nebraska. You can catch KFRM in many ways. Of course, 550 on the AM dial, streaming at kfrm.com, or on your smartphone by going to the TuneIn Radio app, or on Ag AM in Kansas on Tuesdays and Facebook every day of the week. KFRM, tune us in. You'll be glad you did.
Soil is the life of a farm, and for 25 years, SureCrop Liquid Crop Nutrition has helped growers produce abundant quality crops while preserving and improving the soils they steward. SureCrop offers complete soil and plant analysis with cropping recommendations, delivery direct to your on-farm storage, and quality crop nutrition custom blended for your field. Choose SureCrop for the assurance of excellence for your soil. Call today or visit their website for more information. Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, and with us we have Wade Radina of Radina's Bakehouse here in Manhattan, Kansas. And Wade, I know you're an artisan baker. So tell me what artisan bakery is.
All right, I'm glad you asked, because that is a word that is misused and overused, I believe, a lot, mostly for marketing reasons. But an artisan is a person who, it's a craftsperson who produces things, be it baked goods or crafts, in traditional ways, using traditional methods, traditional techniques, and traditional materials. And we often hear the term artisan bread. But it's really misused. A bread can't be a person. A bread can be artisanal. So an artisanal product, like bread, baked goods, or whatever it might be, these mugs, for instance, are made by a local artisan. It is the traditional method that we're looking for, and it yields something unique, and it yields something that you don't find out of an industrialized process. And it's not to say that industrialized processes don't have their place, because they absolutely do. But there needs to be a place in the world for the artisan and artisanal products, and people certainly appreciate them. It's definitely a niche.
Okay. Well, tell us how you got the training. You just don't become an artisan baker just like that. There's some training, obviously. Right.
It's there's a process, and my process was kind of thrown into the fire because we had our bakery in Aggieville, which was a small operation, and as we started growing the coffee business, I actually came to a point where I promised my bakery manager that I wouldn't open another store without expanding the bakery first. And so that's the dream of this bakery was always there. And the dream was a bakery that not only could do traditional scones, muffins, pastry, but also do artisanal breads. And the difference is artisanal breads need a lot of space to become bread. It takes somewhere between 22 and 30 hours for a loaf to go from flour to bread. It needs a place to just hang out and do that. It needs a special oven to bake in, steam injected, stone lined. Our oven came from France. So how do I get there from being a coffee guy? I was roasting my coffee, which is a very complex and artisanal process. So it wasn't a big reach to say, how do I make bread? And where I went for that information wasn't oddly enough in Manhattan, because we have a tremendous resource of bakery science and the American Institute of Baking here. But they don't have the exclusively artisan approach. I ended up at the San Francisco Baking Institute in San Francisco. And that school was started by a gentleman named Michel Suisse. And I may not be saying that right, because it's French. But he is probably one of the top 100 bread bakers on the planet today.
Wade, don't go anywhere. We've got more to do. And folks, you at home, don't go anywhere either. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
No matter where, no matter why, the Veterinary Health Center at Kansas State University is committed to providing quality patient care to animals and exceptional customer service to their owners. From routine checkups to emergency and specialty care, our world-renowned specialists and experienced professionals are here to discover, to teach, and to heal.
Let us know.
How can I help?
How can we help?
Valley Vet Supply is devoted to providing information and professional quality products at reasonable prices.
Valley Vet Supply.
Tarwater Farm and Home has been family owned and operated since its beginning in 1978. What you need for farm and agriculture, lawn and garden, clothing and footwear, and so much more. You'll be surprised at what you'll find in this huge store. They have what you need and lots of it. So come take a look. You'll discover that customer service is first and foremost. Always has been with the Tarwaters. Tarwater Farm and Home, 4107 North Topeka Boulevard.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Good morning, folks. Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, your host, and with us we have Wade Radina of Radina's Bakehouse here in Manhattan. And Wade, we've been here, as you know, we've been here since early this morning. And although I didn't get to wear the uniform like you're wearing, I got to help make some bread.
Yeah.
Let's kind of talk about the process, because it's not just run into the grocery store and get a loaf of bread off the shelf. It's a process. So let's kind of talk about that multigrain up there.
Okay. Well, it is a process. That's what artisanal products require. Our bread, this bread that we baked this morning, was started on. So this is Wednesday morning. This bread was started on Monday night. So Monday night we mixed a levain, which is a natural starter, and we don't use yeast in our most of our breads, very few. We use just a starter. So for instance, this sourdough is literally the only ingredients are flour, water, and salt. That's it. And that levain is what we're using to leaven most of our breads on here. So we would build that up on Monday night. On Tuesday morning, we mixed and shaped these loaves. We left them out for a set amount of time to proof, and then we put them into a large refrigerator to retard that proofing, slow it down. And that gives us some predictability in the rise. And also, the longer the rise, the more flavor you're going to get in that bread, the acidity, the development in there, the complexity of flavor.
Right.
And that's why we don't use commercial yeast, because a commercial yeast would just kickstart that bread. And most commercial breads go through a total of probably 2 to 3 hours of total rise time before they're baked. Our breads go through somewhere between 22 and 30 hours of rising before we bake them. And of course the proof is in the bread. It's in the crumb.
So let's talk a little bit about the sourdough here. How come there's such a big break in that right there in the middle?
Well, the sourdough is a good, strong. I mean, this is the powerhouse of all bread, and this is the very traditional. So what we've got there is see if we can see it on there. When we scored this bread, which is slicing it before it goes in the oven, this bread is going to rise one more time. When we put it in the oven, all the fermentation in there is going to go crazy. The gassing off, it's going to rise that dough one more time. And if we don't give it somewhere to go by scoring it with a razor, it's just going to blow the loaf apart. So this is our score. This is how we wanted to control. This is the shape we were looking for in the loaf. And then what we see here is that ear, it's called raising an ear, is a sign that we had the level of fermentation and the level of proofing in the loaf that we were looking for. So that is something you're looking for in an artisan loaf, and it's also something you won't get in a commercially fermented, commercial yeast. And then you see we also have a lot of small bubbles. Those bubbles are referred to as fermentation bubbles, and also a sign of a natural, very slow fermentation. With commercial yeast, what happens is that process, that metabolism is so fast that these things blow apart. Right. When it happens so slowly in that 22 to 30 hour rise, that we end up being able to capture a lot of that gas and that acidity in the loaf. It just doesn't get blown out.
So what is this good loaf of bread supposed to sound like?
Well, you should hear it. You're right. And I don't know if I...
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of crispiness. That one's been out of the oven for a couple hours. The baguette is still warm, so it's not going to quite be, once it's at room temperature, it's going to... But yeah, baguette should crunch. Bread should crunch. And when we get our bread from a grocery store, you even if they call it artisan, you seldom get that level of crispness, because that's really a reheated product.
Again, don't go anywhere. We've got another couple segments, and you folks at home, stay with us. We'll be right back after these words.
Ag Promo Source is a unique group of marketing specialists with one mission: help your ag business grow. Each affiliate has their own area of expertise, and they work together to bring you advice, products, and services. To get started, visit agpromosource.com. Ag Promo Source, together we grow.
Earlier in my life, I rode bucking horses in rodeos, and my shoulders took such a beating, and that was probably the reason for having several previous surgeries on both shoulders. About a year ago, I decided that I didn't want to have another surgery, and so I contacted Kansas Regenerative Medicine, took their treatment process. It was relatively pain-free. Now, after 8 months, my shoulders have healed to the point where I think I'm probably 90 to 95% of normal. It takes a couple of months to start to see results and feel real progress. That continued to increase gradually until now at approximately 8 months. And I'm extremely pleased. I've got full range of motion. I can lift weights, I can throw, I can do a lot of things that I couldn't do without a lot of pain previously. So I'm tickled to death with the results, and I'd recommend this process to anyone.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer. We have Wade Radina with us at Radina's Bakehouse. And we were just talking about the early process of the mixing time, and the various aspects of the bread. Let's continue after the proofing. Let's continue with the process, Wade.
Okay. Well, the process is, yesterday, these breads, after they shaped them, before we went home, went into a large, for lack of a better term, retarder or refrigerator, where we slowed them down. When we got here this morning, the first thing we do, we look at our levains, we see if they're alive, see if they're doing what they're supposed to do, because if they don't, we've got a problem, and we want to know about it as soon as possible. We check our oven, make sure it's come on. It comes on automatically. It's heated up and where it's supposed to be, because if it's not, we'd rather leave these in the refrigerator longer before we bring them back to life. And then we go and look at our breads, and when we look at them, we're pulling them out. Of course, they're all on racks, and we're checking them for how far did they move. And it varies from one day to the next. And it's interesting, despite having an air-conditioned environment and everything's controlled in there, the bread tends to behave the way the weather is outside. On a hot, humid day, the bread moves faster. Don't ask me why. Even though it's still 70 degrees in our store, there's a connection there that's, I don't know if it's mystical or where you want to go down that road, but it certainly, as an artisan baker, is something you have to be knowledgeable about and understand. So we bring it out, we check it, and we're looking for how much gas is in that bread. And if it's ready, we can load our oven. If it's not ready, we'll leave it out at room temperature for 15 minutes. We'll probably go back to it about every 10 or 15 minutes, and sometimes it could be an hour. If you remember these loaves, which were in bannetons and baskets, which is what this marking is from, they took about an hour and a half before we went into the oven with those.
Like you said earlier, this is an ugly loaf of bread, but let me tell you, that is tasty. That is very good.
Yeah, that's that jalapeno cheddar. You make a grilled cheese out of that, you know you've got a sandwich. That's typically our Wednesday night meal at the Radina house with some tomato soup. When it's ready to go in the oven, of course, we put it on a loader, because this bread is proofed on what we call couche, which is a very thick linen. And that's how we get the structure of the bread to hold while it's going through the proofing process. We load it onto our loader, and in the last step before going in, and it's a rookie mistake that some of us veterans make from time to time, is you score the bread, as we discussed earlier, to get the bread to behave in that final rise in the oven, what we call the oven bounce, to control what it's going to do. But our deck oven for bread is a still oven, so we're really getting the heat out of the stone that's rising up through the oven to rise our bread. And if you look at our breads, you'll see on the bottom, that's a hallmark of a hearth-baked, we call that the foot of the bread, and that's a hallmark of a hearth-baked loaf. As a baker personally, there's few things that get me as excited as a big oven full of bread, baking properly. It's just, to me, it's very beautiful. You know, next to, you know, a trout in a mountain stream, it's hard to beat. Beautiful loaf of bread.
Hang on, we got to take a break.
Okay.
Folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
That's My Farm is brought to you in part by Tallgrass Commodities. Big enough to serve, small enough to care.
Welcome back to That's My Farm. I'm Jim Schroyer, your host, and we're in Manhattan. And we're with Wade Radina. And Wade, tell me, how does this all fit in with your philosophy of Kansas, the people, the crops, especially wheat, with your philosophy?
Well, you know, my philosophy is you have to control the quality. I want to serve the highest quality, and if you're going to do that, you have to control as much production as you can. That's why we roast our coffee. That's why if I can mill my flour, I'd do that too. I know I can, and I'm thinking about it. But anyway, you know, when we get coffee in, for instance, that green coffee comes in a 150-pound bag, and when I unload those trucks, when I'm roasting coffee, I am humbled to think of the work the farmer halfway around the world did. And I think we are so distant, most people, from where our food comes from and the effort that goes into it. You know, I'm a Kansas kid. I was out in western Kansas harvesting wheat, shoveling wheat, 100 degrees, windy, dusty. People don't get that when they eat their food. I do. I smell it, I taste it every time I bake. I love that about the product. And so I want to honor that. I want to honor my ancestors who came to Kansas, Lucas, Kansas, and Scott City, Kansas. And I feel their presence kind of looking over me sometimes, and I enjoy that. You know, if you look inside our store, that barn board on the wall is not something we went down the lumber yard and got. That came out of a granary outside of Lyons, Kansas, that was given to us by a friend's family. And that granary was built in 1870. And so I believe the wood that lines our walls, and I made some of our tables out of, has probably held at least 100 years, 100 harvests, if you will, against it. Yeah. And so when I see that and I think of all the work, you know, one of the most awesome sights in the world for me personally is to see, you know, several combines work in a field. You know,
that's great.
That's moving for me, and it takes me back to my childhood, and I see all those things when I see this. So, and I want my family to be aware of it, and I want to bring that into my community. So I hope that's what we're doing.
That's great. Now, there's one aspect we haven't talked about, and that's your wife Annette's chocolate shop.
We'd be remiss not to do that.
Exactly.
The best part of the operation is my wife, and followed closely by her chocolate. She is a certified chocolatier from the school École Chocolat, which is a French-Canadian chocolate school. She makes her chocolate here in the bakehouse. We have a separate room, humidity and temperature controlled. Chocolate's pretty finicky. So, and we sell that chocolate here and also in our cafes.
Now, how does someone get a hold of you or learn more about this operation?
Well, probably the fastest, easiest way, if you're not in Manhattan, is to go to our website, which is radinasbakehouse.com. So that's probably the easiest way. Or if you're in Manhattan, Kansas, we've got, of course, our bakehouse located right here downtown. If you're coming downtown, driving down Fort Riley Boulevard, you're going to drive past us. And then we also have 3 other locations, coffee houses around town, one on campus, one in Aggieville, and one on the west side. So,
Wade, thanks for taking time to be on That's My Farm. We really appreciate it. And folks, thanks for being with us as well. And don't forget, next week we'll have another issue of That's My Farm.
Closed captioning brought to you by Ag Promo Source. Together we grow. Learn more at agpromosource.com. To see this show and past episodes of Ag AM in Kansas, go online to agaminkansas.com.